So beyond saying that nothing here can be construed as investment advice, you need to speak directly to your investment advisor about issues that affect you specifically.
This presentation is for entertainment and educational purposes only.
Got it. There we go. Right.
Hi, can everybody see my screen here?
Yes,
with
it's looking
the-
good.
Okay, okay. Okay, so here today we're going to talk about timeless troubles, which is recurring issues we see with clients all the time. Emily, are you doing the introduction or do you want me to?
Go for it. I'll be
Okay,
ready.
so we're going to cover, we came up with a list of 5 recurring topics, so you can see them here. The first one, Emily is going to start with focusing on the whole picture instead of getting caught up in an individual thing. Then I'm going to discuss how to balance debt and savings. Then David is going to go through how important it is to be proactive when working with a financial advisor. Danielle's going to touch on death and estate planning and how important that is. And finally, budgeting. I think mostly Danielle, but the team is going to chip in too. So
Good to know.
good to know. Okay. Then we have this is Danielle. She is great, and here's me, also great. You can read these on your own time, and Emily and David, of course. And with that, Emily, would you like to take it away?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, so as Amanda stated, the first common question or common issue we see with clients year to year, year over year, all the time, is we find that they tend to focus on one piece of their financial picture and maybe get a little overwhelmed by it instead of looking at the whole picture. So a lot of people think of us just as investment advisors, and while investment management is a big part of what we do, we also help with financial planning and taking a look at your entire financial picture. So we're going to start off this section with a poll question, just taking a look at how you feel about personal finances. Part of this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on how a person's feelings can kind of get in the way of looking at the full financial picture and making the best financial decisions for you, as well as how taking a look at blanket advice can sometimes put you in the wrong, maybe not wrong, but maybe not the most advantageous direction. Okay.
So I believe I launched the poll.
Yes.
Yes, it's up.
Oh, okay. Somebody voted, so I can see it.
Oh, Amanda's sound is going wonky again.
Doesn't let me vote. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't let us vote.
I forget.
I'm sort of calm and thoughtful because nobody really knows for sure that they're doing everything right.
That's true. I had to put cats in somehow, so also
I appreciate that.
that's where those go.
I felt like I'm in the curious thing because there's so much that new stuff you can learn, and especially given changes in the geopolitical, financial, whatever economic markets. They're moving pieces.
Yeah, so it's good to stay curious about what's going on around you. All right, so curious and thoughtful seem to be the most. Those are good. That's great. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, that kind of brings us into this fact that, ask us for help. You're not bothering us. As I said, you may think of us just as investment management advisors, but we can also help you, work on other financial issues that you come across. And also consider which sources you trust to help you put all of these pieces together. So it's never been easier to just Google a question or, ask people on social media a question. And this may or may not be some of my recent Google history. And maybe these are things that are better to be left to crowdsourcing or maybe not. But when it comes to things that are really going to affect your overall financial picture, you want to go to somebody you trust. So that is hopefully us at Propel. And as we go along here, what makes your personal financial plan work the best for you? That is getting advice that is unique to you. So if we've had clients come to us and saying, oh, I've always heard that investing in my 401k is the best place to put all my money. I should always be maxing that out. And while that may work for some people, maybe some young people who that's the only option they might have when they're first starting out, typically blanket advice, it doesn't consider your risk tolerance, your time horizon for your future goals, and any other personal financial goals that you might have. So on the right there, you see different types of vehicles that you could utilize to invest for the future. Another thing we've heard from people once in a while is, I've been maxing out my Roth since I was 25, so I'm good. But maybe now you're 35, you've been promoted a few times, you have a little more expendable income, or on the other side, maybe you have way more responsibilities, you have kids and you need to be focusing on, saving for their future as well as your own. So contribution strategies, they become outdated as your financial situation changes. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about your feelings and your funds, like that first poll question. And it's not even necessarily something that you may even be aware of. For example, we have a lot of people that come to us saying that they want to pay off a loan. And it comes from a feeling like it makes me so anxious to owe money to a bank. And while that can be very scary, if you're able to look at your entire financial picture, have one of us help you with a financial plan, you may be able to easier see and zoom out to understand that carrying some debt might actually make more sense than paying it off. And Amanda's going to do a very in-depth example about interest rates and debt and how that all balances out. Another thing we see a lot of people doing, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but you may not realize that it's your feelings that could be getting in the way. So that's keeping a large amount of cash, like in your checking account, or just keeping too much in a savings account that doesn't give you a lot of yield. So we've heard people say, I feel comforted by seeing a certain number in my checking account. So again, if you're able to step back, look at your whole financial picture, do some budgeting and some planning, you can see that, okay, maybe I don't need $100,000 in cash in my savings account. I only need 3 to 6 months of emergency savings, and you can more easily separate that cash and help it work for you a little bit better in a different kind of investment vehicle. So this next slide is just a few questions that we've gotten over the years relating to these two topics about, using blanket advice and also having your feelings kind of intertwined with your finances. So should I max out my 401k? It depends. Does your employer offer a match? Kind of all those things I discussed earlier, that maybe having a few other accounts might be more beneficial. And then I've heard this one a couple of times. I don't know if you all have, but I'm nervous about the stock market. Should I invest in real estate instead? And this is an interesting one because a lot of people, or some people, may feel comforted by seeing and being able to touch your investment. But and the stock market can feel like this cloud in the air that's not real. But if you're only purchasing real estate, like this tangible property, it concentrates your investments just in one sector. So it's actually a lot more risky because the housing market is going to be affected all the same way than if you had a mix of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, where it's diversified and becomes less risky.
I want to jump in on that point for just a second about tangibility. And we've brought this up a few times in recent conversations and educational things. And the stock market is pieces of companies, real companies that you spend money on that impact your lives, that you see all around you: cars, electronics, clothing, service-oriented industries. So there's definitely a tangibility. It's making sure that you connect it with the world around you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it for sure. I think that's it for me. So here's Amanda talking about balancing.
On there. Thanks, Emily. That was really great. Some really great examples. Emily mentioned briefly the balancing debt versus savings. We get this question often. I feel like there's more people out there who are not asking us this question, who could maybe use some guidance with it. So I just want to walk through an example of how we think through this. I did include a picture of a sailboat here. I've gotten into sailing lately, so that's sort of the green theme through my talk. The bottom of the boat here, you can see this is called the keel. That's what provides balance in a boat. When the wind tries to blow on the sails, it keeps everything in line. It keeps you moving forward. So here is my poll. Give me a second while I launch it. Okay, hopefully you can see my poll. Are you currently working on paying off the debt? You can pick more than one if you have more than one: a student loan, car loan, mortgage, credit card. There are some people out there who are debt free. There are other kinds of debts that I did not list here, like, I don't know, payday loans. Hopefully you don't have any of those. If you do, you should call us right away, because you should never be doing that. Okay, we can help you do that. Okay, so we have the results. We have some student loans and mortgage credit balance. Personally, I don't have a mortgage, but I do have student loans, and I feel like they're never going to end. And then you can see here, this is a picture of me sailing last week in New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty in the background. So there's a mix. There's a mix of different kinds of debts out there. Like Emily touched on, a lot of anything in finance can trigger emotional reactions. Debt seems to be particularly tough on people. If a lot of people attach a moral thing to it, they feel like a bad person by owing this money, and it really should weigh them down. So we like to say we want to reframe how we think about that. And that's one way to do that is by doing some planning. We think of it, as like a line item on a balance sheet, and, use mathematics to analyze it. Okay. And so for us, we can take a step away from that emotional feeling that the debt can trigger and help you come up with a plan, which will then help you reduce your stress about it. Some people are better at this than others.
Amanda,
Some
can
people
you
get
close
really
the poll
focused.
so we can see the slide? There we go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Some people want to only focus on savings. Some people might get really focused on just paying that debt. A lot of times what works best is to find a balance. And then here you could see this is capsized where they didn't find the right balance. So I'm going to walk through an example. I did use a picture of a captain here purposefully. One, because they're a captain, they're taking charge of the situation. They're not just sort of floating along. And then also I use this bubble to reflect their statements out loud, because they're asking somebody for help, which is what a lot of people. Okay, so here I have two examples and two different approaches, just so you can see how we could work through this. So here's a captain in the green shirt and a captain in a purple shirt. They're both 45 years old. They currently have a mortgage with a 3% interest rate. A lot of people do have interest rates this good. I know right now, obviously, interest rates are way up, but hopefully many people have locked in a lower interest rate with this. And then I'm using simple numbers here. They have a $2,000 monthly mortgage payment they make every. Then the woman in the green shirt has extra disposable income, so she has an extra $1,000 per month which she puts towards her mortgage because she hates having this mortgage. She wants to get it paid off fast. And the woman in the purple shirt has an extra $1,000 of disposable income. And instead of putting that extra towards her mortgage, she's putting it into a savings account and investing it. Okay, she's not doing what Emily said, where she just lets it pile up in her checking account. Okay, she's putting it towards investing. Okay, we have a plan. By doing it this way, the green shirt woman pays off her mortgage by age 57. And the purple shirt woman pays off her mortgage by age 65. After the green shirt woman pays off her mortgage, she begins taking the $3,000 per month that she was paying to the bank and begins investing that money. I think this is a generous example because in real life, somebody who actually pays off their mortgage and doesn't have the established discipline of the monthly savings is not going to start immediately putting that money in a savings account, right? They're going to be so excited they don't have their mortgage payment anymore. They're going to, they're going out for dinner, right? They're going on a trip. They're excited, right? So this is a very fictional person, but that's the type of emotional reaction that can generate when you feel that and makes you feel lighter and better, and it doesn't necessarily need to create financial systems. Even though I do agree that you should definitely somebody get that mortgage. But anyway, so now 55 years old, let's say they retire. Okay. And I know David gets upset about the word retirement and what it means for people, but in this case, I'm saying they stop having income. Okay. And they transition from the savings phase to the spending phase of life, if you will. So the woman in the green shirt paid off her mortgage early, if you remember. So I ran all the numbers on this. And so by paying off the mortgage early, she did save on interest. She saved more than $50,000 by paying it off early, right? And the woman in the purple shirt, remember, she balanced the savings with the debt. Her savings account grew significantly more, even though she was contributing less per month, but she contributed less per month over 20 years instead of over 8 years. And so then when she's retiring at age 65, she has almost $90,000 more in her pocket than the woman in the green shirt, while both of them have paid off their mortgage. And then because this is a financial advisor webinar, I had to include a chart of this graph. And you can see the woman in the purple shirt.
That's such a pretty
despite
chart,
her paying more
Amanda.
interest, she does have more. That what?
It's such a pretty chart.
Oh, you like it? Okay, thanks. And then this is a simple example. I mean, we do this for clients. We do taxes as a factor. So this example doesn't include taxes, but that can add recall. And also, different people, different types of debts have different interest rates. So in this example, I used a 3% interest rate and assumed a 6% rate of return on the investment account. And so obviously depending on your rate of return and on the rate on interest rate on your debt, that can impact, all of these things can impact the calculation. But the point I think at the end is to say it might not be what you think, that the increase in the investment account is so significant compared to the savings on the interest that you pay the bank that it more than outweighs paying up your mortgage really. And then if I decide we do this plan, we come up with a plan for the smooth sailing going forward. And with that, we're going to transition to who's going to talk more about how important it is to use your advisor to help you make these decisions and plans.
We do a lot of this, and we think it pays off to people, and we think that we'd love to see people do it more. So mainly I'm going to go through some examples of the kinds of questions that we have encountered and quickly how we responded to them. I'm not going to go with much detail as Amanda did on that one particular question, but that is a common one. So go ahead and do the slides, Amanda, and I'll go through the list. We think before you commit to a significant change in your finances, you should talk to us. We think that two things happen. It helps people avoid mistakes, what we see as mistakes, or also to optimize your results. It also cures whatever doubt you have, and we think that doubt is your friend. When you get that feeling in your stomach that you're not quite sure, that's when pick up the phone, talk to us about it. We all keep our cell phones pretty open or very open, and can be, if not reached quickly by a voicemail, we can get back to you. Let's go to the next slide. We just went through using savings to pay down or alternatives to investing or paying down the mortgage. The other twist on that is to actually withdraw from your retirement account to do that. That is usually even less advantageous, but we do get that question some. We tend to think that you should leave your retirement accounts, especially those that are tax sheltered, the IRAs and the Roths, intact to them in most cases, but it is worth doing some analysis if you have a particular reason to do that. The harder question a lot of people have is, how do you save for retirement and your child's education? Those two tend to conflict. And again, it depends on the situation a little bit, how many children you have, what kind of schools and training you think that they might need, and how well are you along on your retirement goals, which usually come first to the child's education goals. But those are good things to talk about, and sometimes they're hard to talk about because trying to get them both done is really hard. Okay, let's go to the next slide. The big car loans, if you've ever listened to Dave Ramsey on the phone or on the radio, and he does a lot of books and seminars and whatever, he's way over there on some issues. This is one of the issues. He's way over there. He doesn't think you should ever have a car loan. You should only pay cash for the kind of car you can afford, and if you can't afford one, buy a junker, and that'll save you money in the long term. Some financial academics have studied this, and they think having large car loans every few years, say if you have a 40-year period of time that you're going to own a car, and you get a new car every 4 years, this is one of the things they've studied, that means you buy 10 cars in 40 years. And, that'll cost you, a lot of the studies have said something in 7 figures on your retirement, because you're paying interest, you're suffering depreciation of those new cars, etc. So we like to talk to people about this. It doesn't come up a lot, but we're probably going to say, be a little more frugal on your cars. It is a personal goal some people have, and some people need these for work. So that adds more complexity to the question. Should you increase your IRA distributions when you're in a lower tax bracket? This often comes up on inherited IRAs. If you've inherited an IRA and you buy into that idea that once the money's in a tax exempt vehicle like an IRA where it compounds tax-free, leave it there as long as you can. But sometimes when you're in a lower tax bracket, and perhaps your heirs are going to be in a higher tax bracket, or you yourself may be in a higher tax bracket later, you may want to actually increase that. So that gives a different twist on a question that sort of has a stock answer, but when you look at the details, can be different. Most people that do Roth conversions do them at younger ages to build up retirement funds and to build up their Roth so that they have a balance between their IRA that's non-Roth, their IRA, and their brokerage account savings. But you can also look at them a little closer when you're facing that increase in Medicare premiums that you start having to pay based on your higher income. So if you're doing your RMDs and your withdrawals from your normal IRA are going to force you up into a higher bracket in those Medicare premiums that come out of your Social Security check, or you might have to write a check for. Using Roth conversions to address that when you're closer to retirement can also be useful, but it takes a little working through the math. We found some people when they inherit money in a IRA, because that's one of the ways you inherit money is your parents or your other people who make you a beneficiary, cause you to inherit an IRA, that you go, oh, it's inherited money. Let's take it and spend it. Let's buy a new car. Whatever you might want to do with it. And that usually is a bad idea. So if you're thinking about taking all your windfall from an inherited IRA, please give us a call so we can talk about the consequences.
The flip side, I was going to interrupt. The flip side of that is there are people who think they have to take the money out right away.
Oh yeah.
And on the last 3 points that David just made, these tax rules are very complex and they've changed dramatically over the last 5 years. And it's really, really important to research it each and every year, specific to you, before you make any decisions, because once you do them, it's very hard to undo them.
That point that Danielle's making kind of reinforces this idea that we mentioned in an earlier slide. Don't just go with that stock advice that maybe your parents used, or maybe you heard somewhere, or even worse, you read it in some of these financial advisor columns in the newspaper that often do not have good advice in them because they don't take into account the complexities or the details of your situation. So that's something we run into. We've got another slide or two, I think, on these. Adding your name to your parents' home. This is easy. All you got to do is do a new deed and talk to your parents and add your name, and all of a sudden you're a joint tenant on the home because you think that's an easy way to avoid probate and move on. The biggest thing that can happen to you that really is the opposite of that is, what if you die first and your parent has to re-inherit their own home? So unforeseen circumstances by these simple devices often don't work. So please talk to us about them. In some cases, they may make sense. What do you do with a financial windfall? We talked about a little bit. Think about it. That first impulse may be the wrong one. You've just had a good thing happen, do something good with it. We can help you with that. Potential mistakes is kind of what Danielle was talking about. If you don't know some of the detailed law or haven't thought about certain things, there are potential mistakes lurking out there. You may not have the slightest idea that you're walking into. And then finally, or I don't know if this is finally, I think we may have a couple more. Remember, you don't know what you don't know. You really don't. And this is the world we live in today. So those are a few things. All of these we've encountered. People have called us about these. We didn't just make these up hypothetically, because they do come up. You got the next slide.
It's important to remember that anytime you move money, sell something, spend money, there's a consequence of some type. And if it's a one-time kind of thing that you don't do all the time, it's best to learn what those consequences are before you do it.
Yeah. These big things like the windfalls can also have substantial amounts of money associated with them. So they can turn into big mistakes when you encounter those consequences you didn't expect. Okay. I hope that's enough. And don't forget that our cell phones work.
Everybody's favorite topic. It's coming up a lot. The baby boomer generation is getting older, and I have a lot of clients who are in their 50s and 60s worrying about their parents who are in their 80s. And so we did an entire seminar on death planning last fall, I think, all about it, because it's such a big deal. And not only are all the rules very complicated, but you're also dealing with it at a time of emotional distress. And so it is, I say it all the time, plan for death way before it gets here. And it's not just death, it is incapacity. And that often comes before death. So on the first slide, because we just did we did a presentation on it last year, I recommend that you read that one. I just kind of went over some of it, but I wanted to start with a little poll. just to see where others are at and get you thinking about things. And so what does estate planning look like for you and your loved ones? And if the first question is, what is estate planning? We need to talk. You need to find a good lawyer to help you out. The second is that some folks are very worried about their parents, but haven't done anything for themselves. Some have done pieces of their estate plan. People know what a will is. I hear that a lot. Like, I have a will. Is that enough? No, there are other documents that you need to have. And others who have got their act together. I met with a client yesterday who has all of their estate planning done, and that is unfortunately very rare. A lot of people do not have all their estate planning, and even if you do have your estate planning done, it changes. You know, you need to revisit it and check it out. Sometimes your life changes, your goals change, something happens you weren't expecting, or the tax laws have changed, or legal requirements have changed. So it's not something that you're done with. Oh, no.
Can you see the results? Yeah.
Yes.
Like you said, it's very common
He's
to
still
not
my
have it
heart.
done.
Yeah, and you know, I think some people put it off because they don't want to think about it. Other people put it off because it seems expensive. Other people put it off because they're healthy and they don't think they're going to need it. And the whole point is that you never know when you're going to need it. So it's incredibly important to have. I had met with some clients who refused to do their estate planning until their kids were grown because they could not agree on who would get their minor children. And thankfully they are still alive and well and have been around for a long time. But it's even more important to do it when you have minor children for that reason.
No, I think, Danielle, I think that's a universal point. Sometimes people just don't know what they want to do, like what I want to do with the children,
Yeah.
so therefore they don't do anything.
And
So some of these
what I
questions are
usually,
kind of hard.
yeah, and I've done estate planning over the years as well. And what I usually recommend for people is, what are the chances you're both going to die before your kids are grown? And they're like, well, probably not high. Okay, then stop making that the reason you haven't done your documents. Just pick someone that doesn't, make your skin crawl and, hope for the best, but you still have to have documents.
That's a good point.
All right, so I'm gonna sort of focus on just sort of the stages of this instead of all of the nitty-gritty, since we did cover it so much before. And so here I want to talk about dates. There's a lot of confusion with folks about when they have to do what documents apply when, and it is confusing. So I hope that this little timeline is helpful. So the before box means before anybody's incapacitated, before anybody dies, today, how you are right now. You're alive, you're well, you don't know when anything's going to come. This is the before period, and it is the best time to begin planning. Number one, you are able to make decisions. Believe it or not, some people have a very hard time making decisions, but if you think you're having trouble now, wait until you have a stroke or you have been diagnosed with a terminal illness. That is going to make it very difficult to make decisions. So please do them now. Document prep, obviously, changes can still be made even when you have your documents ready, which I already talked about. It's time to plan. It's time to plan for next steps. Who do you trust? It doesn't have to be someone in your family. Maybe you have a best friend who you feel like you can tell them everything. You feel like they would follow your wishes, depending on what happens to you. Start talking to those people. Don't just create documents and not tell anybody. You want to make sure that somebody's ready for that to happen when it happens. And it's really important to have professionals. I know that there's LegalZoom and all these things where you can make your own documents, and I know it's cheaper, but at the very least, have a good attorney, a good financial advisor, and a good tax preparer. Those people all have different functions. We get a lot, because we're lawyers and CPAs, we get a lot of questions like, well, can't you just do all of this? And the answer is no, because we can help with it and we can give you advice and we can kind of steer you to the right folks, but there are reasons that people specialize in certain areas of law because they're complicated, they change a lot. You want to make sure you're getting what's best for you. After the before, often comes a period of diminished capacity. Unless someone just dies suddenly out of nowhere, there's usually a period of time where you are physically or mentally diminished in your ability to do these things for yourself. So then when that happens, you have a limited bit of time to make changes. Dementia is a very common issue with folks as they get older. once somebody is diagnosed with dementia, it does not necessarily mean you cannot make changes to documents. You just have to be careful. And it's all the more a reason to have a good attorney so that they can be there, they've taken notes, they can ask all these questions. So if a judge asks for proof that that person was lucid when those changes were made, you have someone to fall back on. It's not just on you fighting with your siblings or whatever. Sometimes you just have diminished capacity and you need somebody to help you with your day-to-day. We have clients a lot we've known for 20 some years, and they call us up, say, hey, can you do this for mom? And to some degree we can, but at some point I'm going to say, I need a power of attorney. So there are documents that you need to have in place before death. Power of attorney for property and a healthcare power of attorney are the two biggest ones, so that when somebody is unable to do things, and sometimes that happens overnight, you have the ability to help out. And you also, sometimes when diminished capacity begins, or depending on what the diagnosis is, it is time to plan for death. And you need to have those before plans in place so that you don't feel like you're running over mom or dad or whomever and making decisions for them. That is not a comfortable place to be. It's much better to be like, this is what mom wants. And you can go on from there. Once the date of death occurs, there's kind of a big before and a big after. There are no changes. Nothing can be changed. A deceased person cannot receive income. They cannot pay bills. So when I get clients a lot who say, okay, mom's Social Security is still going. Like, well, you need to call Social Security and take care of that. Or the utility bills are still getting directly withdrawn from the checking account. That has to stop. You can't do that anymore. So you're very busy, the first couple of months after someone dies, if you're in charge, because there's a lot of things you have to shut off and change and start up, and you might need an estate, or there might be a trust, or there might be both. And all of those things are different, and they are treated differently legally and tax-wise. And it's really important to understand what that's going to look like if you are dealing with it. Once you get through that initial period, assuming everything's okay, worst comes to worst, you have to go to probate without a will. That is the worst possible place you want to be. It can take a long time. It can be very stressful. It can be very expensive. So the more documents you have created in that before period, the less you are dealing with in date of death. Some people's date of death phase is, 60 days. They don't have that much to do. Some people, it's 6 months. They just have a small estate to deal with. Sometimes if you don't do it right and you fight about it and there aren't things, and I know people who have been in probate for 5 years. It is not fun. Don't do it. After you get through all that, there's the finals. You have a final personal tax return. Sometimes that's still going on while probate's going on. That is different than an estate return or a trust return. It's important to understand that. And I'm not going to go into the details. They're just very specific to folks. And if you are in charge of distributing assets or managing assets, that becomes its own animal. You have a trust that you're dealing with or an estate you're dealing with that is completely separate from the private assets of your parent or your loved one while they were alive. Do you guys have anything to add on there that I didn't cover or made more confusing?
No, I think you're making it pretty clear, Danielle.
Okay, next
And
slide.
that, especially that point about avoid dying without a will if you have property, that just can be a real nightmare.
Yeah, and that comes up a lot. Say you have parents, two parents, they are married, they own everything jointly. I think some children kind of fall into a lull of they think, oh, it was really easy when parent one passed away. It's going to be that easy when parent two passes away. It is not. So I feel a little rude, but sometimes when someone passes away and they have that situation, oh, it was really easy, everything's taken care of. I'm like, great. When are you going to do documents for parent number two? And they're like, oh, what do you mean? And I kind of start to jump on them for that because it's not the same scenario at all.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as far as our role as financial advisors, when we have the accounts, there is a beneficiary listed, and that is separate from what is in a will. Some people don't realize that if they update their will, that doesn't mean that's going to impact their accounts with us, for example. So
that's a good segue into another slide we're going to have ahead, but yeah, that's a good point to remember. Oh, and there it is. So there's the documents I talked about. Prior to someone's death, you need a durable power of attorney for property. That means you can help pay bills, you can sell the house if you need to, things like that. Healthcare power of attorney. If someone is nonverbal, or they've had a stroke, or they're in a coma, or they have dementia or whatever, you need somebody who can help make decisions for you. After death, those documents no longer exist. That becomes confusion for me with clients. They think, well, mom's passed away, but I still have this power of attorney. Can I call the bank? The answer is no. It is not, it is no longer valid. So now what you need to have is a will that has to be submitted to the court, and you have to be issued letters of office or letters testamentary. Some states call them different things. It's a legal document that allows you to go to the bank after that person has passed away, or contact us as the investment advisor on investment accounts, and says, hey, so-and-so's passed away. I'm the executor on the estate, or I'm the trustee on the trust. It depends on what documents are in place. And I'm giving you a direction to do this thing, and we have to record those documents, and Charles Schwab, who we use for custody, needs to record those documents. So those there's a definitive line there, and those are the documents that are most important in those different phases. And then before, like financial planning, like Amanda said, beneficiaries are different than a will. And I'm not going to go into the details. There are lots of different ways to make sure you get what you want. We recommend you make use of all of them. Say bank accounts, you can add a beneficiary that is going to trump your will. Same thing with investment accounts, retirement accounts. You always want beneficiaries on them. Whenever you have a taxable investment account, at Schwab, they're called Schwab One accounts. If they are not jointly owned, and sometimes when they are jointly owned, we will recommend that you name a beneficiary. It's not automatic. But at the bank, there are a couple different things you can do at the bank. You can have an additional signer on the account. That is not the same thing as a joint owner, which is also not the same thing as a pay on death. So you need to speak to your bank representative and make sure you understand what you're signing up for and what the result of that will be. There are different things. David brought up before retitling assets. Sometimes folks think, oh, mom's putting me on her house so that I don't have to go to court when she passes away. But understand that one of the things that you do when you retitle assets during life is you give up something called a step up in basis. And that's a tax issue. If your mom has lived in her house for 50 years and that house appreciated $300,000, if you retitle that asset before she passes away and you sell it after she dies, you are paying capital gains on that house. If you inherit it from her estate, you are not paying capital gains on the sale of that house. You basically just get to wipe away all that history of gains. That's as far as I'm going to go into that, but it's a big deal. I see it a lot. I tell people not to do it. That's what documents are for. Depending on where you live, sometimes probate is not that complicated. I live in the state of Tennessee. It's not that hard if you have good documents. Illinois is Illinois. It makes everything hard. But even if you have to pay, $8,000 for probate, that's nothing compared to the, $60,000 you might have to pay in capital gains. So you kind of have to weigh what makes most sense to you. The other one I recommend for people when they're doing their documents, their will, their powers of attorney, a trust if it's required, is make sure you have a list of assets, debts, account numbers, login information. You are not going to be able to just go to the mailbox and get the information you need after someone passes away. You're going to have to hunt. And it's a lot of work. So I always recommend that people keep those lists available so that somebody has access to it. My husband knows where things are, but basically if anything happens to me, he's been told to go to Emily. Like she knows everything about me. So to make sure there's somebody available or a place that someone can go that's safe where they can get the information that they need. Also, before you want to do some tax planning, we've talked about this a little bit already. There's gift giving, IRAs versus Roth IRAs. That's a very complex question. Required minimum distributions, that looks different whether it's your account and you've now retired and you've hit the current age, which is 73 on a traditional 401k or an IRA, or you've inherited an account, you have required minimum distributions, it's very, very important that you speak to us, your tax preparer, probably both, about what that means for you and how that looks. You need to know how your assets are owned. And again, and David reminded me that that's very state specific. Some states have something called common law. I'm using the wrong word. Oh my goodness, I'm blanking.
Community property?
Community property, thank you. Different states have different rules. Sometimes you'll have an asset in a different state than the state that you live in. All of those things are important to know well before anything happens and it's too late to fix anything. I already mentioned step up in basis. What assets are affected by step up in basis? Real estate, your taxable Schwab account. Say you have a taxable Schwab account with $300,000 in it with bonds and stocks. You've had, GE stock forever. You inherited it from your father. If your child inherits it, it doesn't matter how much it's gone up all these years, you get to wipe away the previous year's growth because you get to take your tax basis as of the date of death. It's a really big deal. It is something that the Congress was kind of kicking around a couple of years ago. I haven't really heard about it lately. There was some discussion about taking some of that away. It's a huge money saver, especially for the very wealthy, but it affects everybody. So it's really important to know what assets should be inherited, what way, and plan for that. Oh, good, I'm done. Any questions? All right. Seems like I covered it.
Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
Whose dog is that with the stick in its mouth?
Oh, that's
Is
just
it-
a cute dog that I found on Pixabay.
That's
Isn't it
that's
cute?
just out there on the thing. Yeah, okay. I'm impressed with how large that stick is.
I'll do the segue into budgeting. Basically, we talked about all of these things, and at the bottom of them is a budget. And I have budgeting conversations with clients all the time. I have clients who have asked us to do webinars about budgeting. And so we want to address it just a little bit. Everybody's different. What works for you is different for everyone. There's no one size fits all about how to do a budget. So I want to kind of go to the first slide about kind of ways to think about it. Oh, sorry, Amanda threw her poll question here. I will let her go through that.
I like this.
Yeah.
I think
anytime
anytime you have a doubt about what I should do next, I don't know how to handle this situation, the answer is usually take a nap.
Yeah, take advice from your cat.
Look how relaxed they are.
I know.
I am a huge budgeter. I always have been. Before there were spreadsheets. I was drawing spreadsheets on a piece of notebook paper when I was 16 and got my first job. So it's no surprise that I still do it now, but I do it on a spreadsheet. So my budget spreadsheet is set up monthly, but I consult it as often as, oh, you people, you're killing me. I consult it as often as I need to. So usually it depends on like, the due dates on bills, if something comes up that we weren't expecting. So I probably look at my budget at least twice a month. I just threw in some good quotes. A lot of times folks are just not numbers people. Sometimes they're anxious. Sometimes it's just, again, I've budgeted my whole life. I don't understand what it's like to not budget, so I don't really know, but I really liked these ideas. One of them is Dave Ramsey, which is, everybody's heard of this financial guru. A budget is telling your money where to go, not wondering at where it went. I like that one. I sat down with a client once who was like making really good money, more money than they'd ever made in their lives, and they had no idea where it was going. So it was a husband and wife couple. Emily was with me, and we said, okay, go back 2 months through your bank account and your credit cards and look at it. What did you spend money on? And they found out they were spending $400 a month on Starbucks, and they had no idea. So it's really, really important to keep an eye on it. I also like this way of thinking about it. Obama says a budget is more than just a series of numbers on a page. It is an embodiment of your values. And that's absolutely true. How big is your mortgage? Is it because you want a really huge house? What is your car payment if you have a car payment? It is because you wanted that $60,000 car. That is very different from me. I prefer not to spend over $15,000 for a car ever. I will probably never own a brand new car my whole life. So it's a difference on what's important to you, and you can see it on that page. And you might look at that page and go, that's not really how I feel. And maybe that's a good time to make some adjustments. My personal favorite is David's. We were having an internal conversation about doing a spreadsheet webinar, and David said, but it's 2024. Who wouldn't want to use a spreadsheet to do their budget?
Well, there are a lot of people that do. They're just not over the hurdle. They're scared by that Excel word or something.
Yeah,
And but the learning curve on using Excel for a budget is not that great. This is really something that
yeah, it's
you
pretty
started doing it
easy.
on paper, but people now usually don't do it on paper, and if they don't do it on a spreadsheet, they don't do it at
They
all.
don't do it at all, or they barely even look at their bank account. I have a 16-year-old son who just got his first job, and I sat down and showed him how to create a spreadsheet in his Google account, like his Google Drive. And it's so simple. It's like he was getting some money as a 1099. So he had, gross income. He had like how much is set aside for self-employment taxes, how much was going into his savings, his spending, and his Roth IRA. So 4 columns. And he was like, oh my God, this is so stressful. And I was like, all the more reason to start young. Start them young, because it's not going to get any easier, folks. There's an awful lot going to be thrown around, and you're going to have a lot of moving parts. So the sooner you figure out how to do that budget spreadsheet, the better off you'll be. So on our next slide.
I just think there are some, there are also good apps out there. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet.
No, it doesn't. You're right. There are apps. I don't know any of those, but
something that works.
yeah. This was Amanda's idea, so I'm going to let her do this one, even though I kind of plugged him in. It was a good idea that there's like, people call and say, well, how much should I do for X, Y, or Z?
Yeah, so I mean, it varies from person to person. So, but there are some basic rules of thumb out there. If you're not sure, it's a good place to start. I'm worried my audio is sort of not good, so hopefully you can hear me okay. But
I know it is.
a big one is housing. Housing should not exceed 30% of your gross income. A lot of people want to buy a house, the first time home buyer, and you look at your income versus what the house costs, especially now that interest rates are up, that's going to jack up your payment. And it's just harder to afford it. And then people who say, okay, and then they stretch, and then they spend 50% of their pay on housing. Fine, they quickly regret it. But they've already bought this house, and they're stuck. So that's a big one, especially if you're buying a house instead of renting, I think. I think this thing about debt payments being less than 36% of monthly gross income, I have never heard this one before. But if your debt payments are 36% of your gross income, that's a significant debt. If you have something beyond like your mortgage payment. I would say for somebody in that situation, you need to make sure that your emergency savings account is in order so that you could stop creating new debt while you work on getting that number down. And I do think, I know it's not on here, but I think when we're talking about budgeting, it's not just about spending less on things, but also coming up with goals and saying, well, I'm not making enough money to meet that goal. Do I need to cut my Netflix subscription? That might not really move the needle. But for some people, what could move the needle is switching jobs, asking for a raise, work on making more money to help you meet those goals. It doesn't have to just be about cutting things. That's how I think. Do you want to go through this employee, how much do I earn slide? Danielle?
Yeah, I can go through it. Unless Emily would like to go through it. We haven't heard from Emily in a while.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, this picture is very cute. I hadn't seen it before. Okay, so as an
I'm trying
employee,
to make this section fun.
yeah,
See?
Yeah.
having a great time. How much do you actually earn? This is something surprisingly a lot of people don't know. So you see your gross pay, that's the amount that your employee pays you. They're like you get a job, your salary, whatever, 50,000. It's like the amount they tell you when you're hired. Taxes come out, your federal and state income tax, Social Security, and Medicare. Social Security is 6.2%. You pay part of it, and your employer pays part of it. Medicare, 1.45%. That's the employee portion, right? Okay. So these are the employee percentages. Your employer
Yeah,
also contributes
if you're
that same amount.
if you're self-employed, depending on where it lands, you get to pay both. So it's double. So it's a little different. But that's why I put employees at the top. It's a little easier when you have a paycheck.
Yeah. And then there's deductions, retirement savings. If your company offers a 401k, you can get that taken out pre-tax. Same thing with an HSA or an FSA, health insurance or life insurance, and these are all things offered by your employer. Those will come out usually pre-tax unless they have a Roth option. And then you finally get tiered net pay. I didn't specifically point this out when we about taxes when we said federal and state income tax. That's your withholding. So, when you get to your tax bracket, you hear people say 20%, 24%. That's the amount that's withheld from your gross pay. State income tax, Tennessee doesn't have any, but here in Illinois, it's been a flat 4.95% for quite a while now. Okay, so down to after all those things is your net pay and what you actually take home. And that amount can be very different from that top number that you were promised or what you in your head think you are making. So yeah, big difference.
I wanted to jump back to the taxes really fast because I think most people fill out this one-page form from their employer to determine how much they're withholding for federal and state income tax. And they just are like, well, I don't know, just do this. I claim 1. I hear that a lot, or I claim 0. And they assume that it's going to cover what they need, or it's taking out just what they need, but it's not. It's one of those things you need to plan for. So it's really important to know exactly how much is coming out for taxes and that it's the right amount so that you don't have any surprises when you file your tax return.
Budgeting parties. I saw this in a newsletter that I'm on. It's like a personal finance newsletter. They suggested having a budgeting party and invite your friends or just sit down with your partner, or maybe even just make it fun for yourself, like put on some music, maybe have a alcoholic beverage or a non-alcoholic beverage and just do something special, get a piece of cake, I don't know, whatever makes you happy, and sit down and make that a plan. Like, okay, Saturday night is I'm not going out, I'm not taking a nap, I'm going to budget, and just make it something a little more exciting because it really does help you, get all of these things into place. If you don't have to create a budget before you can make a financial decision, that saves so much time. Like if you already have it done and you have this big financial decision, it's going to be so much easier.
I like the idea of the party, making it fun, but also getting another person involved creates the accountability, which a lot of us need to do things like this if we find them tedious or unpleasant, right?
Yes, for sure. I also wanted to plug our podcast called Connecting the Dollars because this website was actually based on a podcast recording that Amanda and Danielle did recently. It's episode number 47. You can find it on our website, propelfinancialadvisors.com. Yeah, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more or revisiting these similar ideas with a different take on it, feel free to go take a look there.
Okay, and I think this is our final slide. I know we're coming up on an hour, so do you want to go through this one, Danielle or David? And then we'll wrap it up.
I was gonna let David do it. See, I'm talked on this section.
Well, I just looked at that advice again. I think it's really very good. Your income's going to change over time. It may be higher, it may be lower, it may not meet your expectations, but that's different than your own discipline, your own commitment over the long term. We talk a lot about the difference between, budgeting for your current self and budgeting for your future self. Those are important concepts that are sort of different than your current circumstances. Um, and there will be better financial times, and there will be challenging financial times. That's in everybody's life. It's in the national economy, although we're pretty fortunate in the United States that, as Warren Buffett says, don't ever bet against the U.S. economy. It tends to be a big supporter of your ability to do these things. That's what I think about that.
Because people
Okay.
want this so badly. I talked about doing a mini webinar about budget spreadsheets. That would also be a good time to talk about apps if people aren't into spreadsheets and they want to do some sort of a financial app. I do not know what those apps are because I don't use them, but my colleagues may, and we can throw in some ideas about that. So we're talking about scheduling that here in the near future. I had a client specifically say, please do a budget spreadsheet webinar. Believe it or not, we're not just making this stuff up. All right, any comments or questions from our attendees? Oh, I have Rich joined. I didn't see that. Hi, Rich. Anybody?
Yeah, we will be sending out this recording to
Lauren?
anyone who is registered or and all of our attendees, so you can forward it to someone if you think there's some advice that they might benefit from.
And any suggestions for other webinars in the future? We've got a couple ideas we're already kicking around internally. And our ideas usually come from clients, things that we've seen, good questions we've gotten. So if there's anything that you want us to cover, please let us know. And that can be covered in a blog post, a webinar, a podcast. We have all of those things available to you on our website.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Rich. Yeah, everybody's muted, but you can type your question, or I don't know if we can unmute people at this point if you want to speak. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining, and thanks to my team.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.